Now you might notice that I've got a theme going on here. Flowers on my PowerPoint, flowers on my dress, and then also coincidentally, a beautiful bunch of proteas right next to me. And the reason for that is because my presentation today, in essence, is about flourishing families. Now, already in the time of Aristotle, researchers asked the question, what makes a good, happy, meaningful life? How can we measure such a life, and what are the factors that influence this life? And now, if you are good at maths, you'll realize that, You'll realize that it took us almost more than 2,300 years to ask those same questions to the lives of people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. Now, fortunately, you'll also see that at least it took us only another 20 years and not another 2,000 years to ask those same questions to about the quality of life of the whole family when there is a family member with a disability. So I would like to tell you just a little bit more about family quality of life as a research construct. We define it as the goodness of family life, where family members enjoy their life together, where they have the chance to do things that are important to them. So it's really about the family well-being. We conceptualize and measure it as a multidimensional construct, and this means that we need to look at different domains put together, and then we can say, okay, that measure family quality of life. So for my study, I looked at 5 different dimensions. It was parenting, family interaction, emotional well-being, material or physical well-being, and then also disability-related support. And the whole idea about this, I think it's Prof. de Vries and them that have put the program together has done it so nicely, because my talk or my study actually links with what you've heard this morning about we need to look at the family environment. We can't just focus on the child, we need to look at the family and how we can actually support that family environment. And a family quality of life approach is kind of like taking stock about what's good, what are they happy with, what are the needs, what are they not happy or satisfied with. And because in the end, through our services, we want to create well-functioning families because we know that is supportive for child development and that is the building blocks of society. Okay, so in the past 17 years or so, the research that has been done on family quality of life, there was Nina Zuna and her colleagues, they tried to kind of synthesize all the research that has been done. And they came up with a model, what they called the unified theory of family quality of life. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the model, but what I would like to tell you is that for my presentation today, I focused on 2 family unit concepts and how that influence how satisfied families feel about their family quality of life. And in particular, I looked at family routines and family beliefs. The meaning that family ascribe to the impact of autism on their family, and then just the family routines. So family routines, all families have family routines. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what type of family you are, you have family routines. It's the interactions between family members that happens on a regular basis. For example, preparing and eating a meal together, getting a child ready for bed, waking up in the morning, doing certain things, all of that is what we define in the research as family routines. And the regular family routines have been shown to be a protective factor in resilient families. So we know having regular routines, having a rhythm about everyday life is an important consideration when we think about the well-being of families. However, we also know from research that for families raising a child with autism, this might be a little bit difficult because of the characteristics of autism. So what I wanted to know is how do we find what is the relationship between the regularity of family routines and how satisfied families feel about their family quality of life for our families who are raising young children with autism in South Africa. And then also, so that's already a big and a good enough question, but I wanted to know a little bit more. I wanted to find out how regular family routines also influence how we think about the impact of autism on the family. Because we know, I think you've heard yesterday and through various talks, that the way we appraise a situation often, well, it influences the outcome of the situation. So even though nothing else has changed, the way you think about it does impact the outcome. And you can think about raising a child with autism as both a positive, having positive impacts, but also negative impacts. And I think it's important for us, again, to realize that there's always these two dimensions. It's not an either or, but both of these dimensions can occur simultaneously. And I kind of wanted to find out, okay, so how does this fit into how families feel about their family quality of life? Okay, so basically what I've done is the study was conducted in the Gauteng province of South Africa, and because we have difficulty accessing children that are diagnosed with autism, we don't have a list of all the children diagnosed or a databases, so I basically had to go the other way around, work from a database of schools and centers that cater for children with autism, and then ask those schools to work through them to identify the families that could participate in the study. So in the end, I'm happy to say there were 35 schools, public and private, located throughout the 5 municipal districts of Gauteng that helped me with my study. And in the end, 180 families completed a survey questionnaire that looked at demographic information, but then also 3 family measures that I'll talk about a little later. So just to tell you a little bit, and I think this for those the international visitors, my study also found that I didn't define family as a typical nuclear family, legally married and all of that. I just asked, who do you consider to be part of your family? Who's living in the household every day? So it was really about those people who are closely involved in the day-to-day affairs of the household. And you can see here that 18% of the families reported that grandparents are part of the family. 22% had, it was either aunt or uncle or even just friends or somebody else staying with the family that's part of the family. And also then 13% of the families had a paid helper that they considered to be part of the family. So I think that's interesting and unique, and especially when we talk about family quality of life, obviously it's important how you define family, and we can't just necessarily think nuclear families. Okay. Something else that I can maybe mention, most of the participating families were 2-parent families. Most of the families had 2 children. Regarding ethnicity, 66% of the participants had a black ethnic background, 25% white, 5% Indian or Asian, and then 4% colored. And 4 times more boys than girls. Okay, so when we look at the measures that I used to measure family routines, I've used the family routines inventory. It's just a list of family routines, and families have to say how many times do they actually participate in this family routine. For the family impact of childhood disability, we use the family impact of childhood disability scale, 10 positive questions and 10 negative questions about the impact of autism on the family, and they had to rate the degree of impact. And then for family quality of life, I've used the family quality of life scale developed by the Beach Center for Disability at the University of Kansas in the USA. And it's 25 questions really universal questions, easy to understand, and parents just had to rate whether they are very dissatisfied up to very satisfied. Okay, so first I would just tell you a little bit about the descriptive results before going into the relationships that I wanted to look at. So not surprisingly, we found that the child routines were the most frequent and leisure routines the least frequent. We expected that child routines was going to be some of the most regular routines because previous research said that for families raising a child with autism, a lot of the family routines are evolving around the child with autism. Now this can be potentially good and potentially not so good. One way to look at it positively is that there's a lot of learning opportunities that can be built into those routines, so it's good. But the negative thing is also that maybe that competes with the resources and energy and time for other important family routines, such as leisure routines, which is important for emotional well-being. Okay. And then I'm so happy to share this result with you because for the families that participated in this study, they actually rated the degree of impact of having a child or raising a child with autism on their family as slightly more positive than negative, which is something different that we find in a lot of the literature. And I think it just backs up, there's I think a real push now to say that we as researchers have the responsibility to not only ask the negative questions. If we ask the negative questions, we are going to see all the challenges and all of that. But I think it's important to consider the positives because they are there. And I think it was Professor Rosa Hoekstra who also said yesterday, if you don't ask the positives, you're not going to find out what the positives are. So, and also interestingly, when you actually rate the 20 questions according to the degree of impact, 7 out of the 10 was positive impacts. So, for example, making the family feels that their life is more meaningful, or they have a deeper appreciation for the uniqueness of other people, and things like that. So I think it's important for us just to kind of pause and take notice of that result. And then when we look at the family quality of life results, you'll see that disability-related support, they were the most satisfied with that, and then the least satisfied with the emotional well-being. Excuse me. Now, the emotional well-being finding is really important because this echoes findings of other studies conducted in other countries that use the same measure, and they also find that for families raising a child with autism, this emotional support is the least, they're the least satisfied with that. And I think, again, it just addresses a call that we need to research, develop, or modify targeted services that specifically support the emotional well-being of these families. But having said that, we also know that there's families who are raising children with autism who are functioning well. So I think it's just a balance of we need to recognize the needs, but we also shouldn't assume that, you know, when there's a family in front of you and they have a child with autism, that they necessarily have emotional support needs. Okay, so when we get to the interesting results in terms of the relationships, so we did some fancy structural equation modeling analysis. I'm not going to bore you with all of that. This is the most important thing that you need to take out from this study, is that yes, we did find a significant positive relationship or correlation between the regularity of family routines and family quality of life. And what this means is that for those families who indicated that they've got a rhythmic, regular family routine life, they also tended to report that they feel more satisfied with their family quality of life. On the opposite way, those who had a bit more chaotic life, routines happening infrequently and all of that, they tended to report a lesser satisfaction with their family quality of life, okay? But then also, if you look here, that's also very interesting because when it's regular and things have a rhythm and it's happening regularly, then families tended to feel more positive about the impact of raising a child with autism, which in turn, again, significantly impacted that they feel more satisfied with their family quality of life. And then the opposite happens when we look at this relationship here. So more regular routines, again, less negative about the impact of autism, and again, more positive. So this is really, it was nice to see that what we thought would happen is actually happening, and it just emphasized the importance of what families do on a daily basis. Okay, so what does this mean? What does the findings of the study mean? How can we help families to flourish based on the results of my study? I think first of all, it is recognizing that a family quality of life approach can help guide us as service providers to think about and work towards what brings joy and satisfaction to the families that we work with. The family quality of life scale, which is freely available, you can use that as a conversation starter to identify family needs and identify family strengths. So not only what is not going well and what you're not satisfied with, but what are the things that are going well and what are you satisfied with. And then I think that last one is basically just to say, again, what families do on a daily basis matter, and therefore we need to get to know the families that we work with. Like I said before, we need to find out, so who's part of the family? Is there a granny? Is there an aunt? Is there a paid helper or carer that is part of the family? And getting to know the families and what they do on a daily basis is it's not a big assessment. It's as simple as asking them, so what do you actually do from the time that you get out of bed to the time that you go back to bed? It's as easy as having a conversation like that. Then also just to recognize that in our sample, we also found, similar to other studies, that families appraise the impact of a child with autism both positively and negatively at the same time. And it's important that these two dimensions are at least in balance. And if the negative appraisals are more and families are struggling, then it's important that we consider things like positive reappraisal, where we can kind of sit down with them and maybe talk about things that are positive and that are a positive outcome that's happening in their family that they might just not realize yet. And the other thing is maybe to expose families that are more negative to other families that have found more positive benefits and positive outcomes, and that way they can also see the positive outcomes. And then, most importantly, I feel that any supportive intervention to help a child with autism should facilitate the competence and the confidence of the family in creating and maintaining their daily family routines, and not interfere with the capabilities and the resources that are needed to actually maintain their daily lives. And I think as interventionists, we just need to, again, just pause and see what we're doing. Are we actually making it more difficult in sustaining these family routines, or are we actually helping families to create and maintain these routines? And then I would like to end with this quote to say, flourishing is not a solo endeavor. Nobody can reach their full optimal potential in isolation. And I think it echoes what have been said earlier this morning. Children with autism need a flourishing family environment to grow and develop, but their families need us all as a supportive societal environment to be able to flourish. Thank you. I'm just going to say, so there's 2 publications. If you want to know more about it, you're welcome to email me. The one is looking more at the measurement qualities and the static family unit variables. I haven't discussed that today, and this is the one that I've discussed today. So you're welcome to email me if you want to find out more.